This is Chuck Huber, the voice of Android 17. You're listening to Anime Seekers. You better be, or I'm coming for you. Dragon of the Darkness, Flame!
Jedi Squadron is a podcast run by the Anime Secrets website. Check us out at animesecrets.org for more anime, video game, tokusatsu, and now Star Wars content. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hello, new Padawans, and welcome to the Jedi Squadron podcast. Here, you will be taking lessons in the many pieces of the Star Wars universe, whether it be the movies, animated series, video games, comics, and etc. This is your training into becoming a Star Wars fan as part of the Jedi Squadron. May your training go well, and may the Force be with you, young Padawans. What is going on, Star Wars Nation? This is the Jedi Squadron podcast presented by AnimeSecrets.org, and I'm your host, Nathan Dessau.
And me, Rizwan Merchant.
Okay, he didn't have me prepared for that. Oh my god.
Me said Rizwan Merchant. You said Nathan Dessau. We said Jedi Squadron podcast.
And you said better not talk like that this whole podcast.
No, I'm done. That's the
Okay,
one-time
cool.
thing. I'm not repeating this for episode 2 and 3. I just had to do it for this one. I don't know why. I just had to do it. I was compelled to do it. I think the Force told me to do it.
Okay, yeah, we'll just go with that excuse.
When in doubt, blame the Force.
Right. But anyway, we are here today on May 19th of 2024. That's when we're recording this, to talk about a Star Wars movie that exactly 25 years ago today was released to the public. It was the first Star Wars film to come out in over a decade and a half. And that is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Whether you loved the movie or hated it when it came out, the point is it came out. It was a big hit. It was the highest grossing film of its year, the only film that ever grossed more money than it. Before that was Titanic. It was an absolute massive event. We'll talk a little bit more about how the event was, at that time, but we'll get there in a little bit. But yeah, we are here to talk about this. I'm personally really excited to talk about it because I mentioned it a little bit in our Tales of the Empire review, but I actually went to go see this movie on May the 4th. There was a special screening at this very special theater here in Atlanta called the Plaza Theater. It's a place, they have some cool events. Like every Friday night they do a screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They sometimes do screenings of that really horrible Tommy Wiseau movie, The Room, aka the king of movies that are so bad they're good. But yeah, they were every May the 4th they do a screening of a Star Wars movie, and I went to go see The Phantom Menace with my wife, and I ran into Star Wars Explained there and spoke to him very briefly. But little did I know that there was going to be a huge, something that I totally didn't expect. So
You might say a cameo.
yeah, totally. So the announcers were there, the people who ran the event, they were like giving a big introduction because they do that with all their screenings. They got the guy, so they got one guy who's kind of an internet, I don't want to say sensation, but like he's a well-known public figure, the Star Wars kid. He's the kid who there was like I don't know how many people know this, but there was like a video that went viral on the internet of some kid in I don't know if it was like his gym or like some theater room, but one way or another, he was a kid who had like a broom in his hand and he was swinging it around like Darth Vader's lightsaber, thinking he was alone, but somebody was actually recording him and he got bullied and harassed for it. But now he's perfectly fine, and he's a spokesperson for anti-bullying and harassment, mental health spokesperson. And he was there making a bit of a speech, and he was pretty cool. But then they announced another person. They said, ladies and gentlemen, Ewan McGregor. And when I hear that, so my wife is genuinely surprised, and she's just jumping up and down, and I'm just thinking, okay, cool, okay, you just made me wait for an hour in some hot lobby. That was a funny joke. Start the damn movie. And then I'm like, okay, you got someone who looks exactly like Ewan McGregor. Okay, funny joke. Can we just start the movie? But nope, it was Mr. Hello There himself, and that is literally the first thing that he said when he got on the stage. It was Ewan McGregor. He's apparently, I don't know if he's still here or not, but at the time of that premiere, he was here in Atlanta filming a movie with Anne Hathaway and decided to stop by. And it took me probably 10 minutes to realize this is really happening. I'm literally seeing Ewan
It
McGregor.
took you 10 minutes?
Okay, probably a little bit less than that, but it's like
No, like
I'm
that should have been like a 5 second, like, wait, the goat is here.
yeah, but dude, you got to realize this isn't like if they got some Power Ranger actor to show up on the stage, because Power Ranger actors are one thing, I still would have been great, but this is Ewan McGregor. He's a
Yeah.
big name actor. He's like he's someone who's been in bigger films other than Star Wars. This isn't like if they
You
get
take
Jason
that back.
Bond.
You take that back.
What do you mean?
He's a big time actor, but he can hang with us plebeian fans.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't know that he was that awesome.
Yeah. But no, that's really, really awesome. And just, when you texted me the thing, because ladies and gentlemen, I got a blow by blow account from Nathan of that night as it was happening in real time. And I'm just sitting here eating my cereal, kind of contemplating my life on what I'm doing wrong to where I'm not there meeting or seeing Ewan McGregor in the flesh. Like, that's just so cool to me that you're able to do that.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, he had to leave immediately afterward, but he did a bit of a Q&A, just kind of talking about what it was like, getting on the movie, how he loved the movies growing up, and how his uncle Dennis Lawson was on the original trilogy because he played Wedge.
Yeah.
And how he looked up to Alec Guinness too. So it was a pretty fun experience.
I mean, yeah, that seems like the best way for you to get into the prequel era of our podcast as well.
Yeah.
Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are officially in the prequel era of our podcast for the next, who the heck knows how long it'll take us, but we're going to be here for a while.
And probably probably fittingly enough, after he left, he thanked everybody. I mean, he had to leave to go back. When the movie started, literally the scene where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon turn, the first time that we see them, where they turn around and they lower their hoods, the whole theater just erupted into applause.
I
When
mean,
we saw Obi-Wan for the first time.
that's the only thing you can do at that moment in time, though. I mean, there's no other way to react after seeing the goat himself in the flesh and then see him on the big screen moments later. It's unfitting. But
And another thing too, this is something that I'm pretty sure my brother is going to be bragging about until the day he dies. So the last time I was at the Plaza Theater before that was sometime last summer, where on the same stage that Ewan McGregor was standing on, my little brother was doing a music show where he was playing the drums for someone who was doing a live show there. So yeah, my brother can literally brag that he's performed on the same stage that Ewan McGregor was standing on. So yeah, he's definitely going to be bragging about that for the rest of his life.
well, dang.
Yeah. But yeah, that's just a way to kick off with this. I mean, this is and it's also the first time I've ever seen the Phantom Menace in theaters too, because it came out when I was 5. So my mom took my older brother to go see it, but I never saw it in theaters. And then I don't remember seeing it when it got re-released in 2012 in 3D, just because it didn't really the whole 3D thing just didn't really interest me. So my first time seeing the Phantom Menace in theaters, I definitely picked. Couldn't have picked a better time to see it in theaters for the first time.
I saw Phantom Menace for the first time in theaters. That was my first Star Wars I saw in theater when I was a wee lad. And I remember this kind of anecdotally because it didn't happen to me, but I know my cousin, who is like 2 weeks older than me, he's a massive Star Wars fan his entire life, like I am. And I remember hearing that he tried going for the midnight premiere, and my mom was like, "Hey, so your cousin tried to go in for midnight premiere. I know you didn't because we're not doing that, but do you want to go see the movie? I don't know, next week." I was like, "Yes, I need to see it."
Uh-huh.
So that was my introduction to seeing Star Wars on the big screen, was when I was a wee lad.
Yeah.
And then I saw the other two in theaters, and ever since then I've seen probably everything in theaters that came out since.
Yeah, me too. I've seen the other remaining prequels. I mean, with the Phantom Menace now, I just want to see Empire and A New Hope in theaters, and then I'll have seen every single Star Wars film that's ever come out in theaters.
Wait, how did I see Empire and you didn't?
Well, I could have seen Empire last year.
Year
On
before, I think.
Yeah, just it never really occurred to me to do May the 4th at that
Oh,
point.
okay. Yeah, because I think I saw A New Hope on that event, and then I saw Empire Strikes Back, and then I saw Return of the Jedi last year indirectly with you because we planned going the same night in different states
Yeah.
just so we could
Uh
do our
huh.
podcast.
But anyway, let's jump into the brief history of this movie. You want
Yeah,
to get started?
I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Okay, so to kind of talk about technically the idea of this movie. Well, I mean, this is the case with like all Star Wars movies. This movie could originally be said to have been conceived in while Lucas was writing the original 1977, sorry, a Star Wars film. As most people know, although I'm very skeptical that George Lucas had everything planned out right from the starting gate, and you can hear more details in my Splinter of the Mind's Eye review. Lucas has claimed that he originally had one big movie, but he felt that it was too complex to be contained in a single film. So we introduced a wider story arc that could be explored in sequels. He originally wanted to work on a sequel trilogy um, while he was filming Empire and Jedi, but he decided he didn't want to return to the franchise after 1983's Return of a Jedi came out, and he canceled it. Part of me wants to assume that might have had something to do with him just being in a really bad place in his life, because like shortly after, it was either during Return of a Jedi filming or shortly after, he and his wife, the mother of his children, got divorced, which kind of played a huge part in the next film that he released, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But we'll talk about that at some other point, if ever. But yeah, he was definitely not in a great place. But then, over the years, he became fascinated on the idea of expanding on the backstories of previously established. And in the early 90s, Star Wars was seeing a massive resurgence in popularity. There were brand new toys being released of much higher quality. There was a new line of comics being published by Dark Horse. There was the Thrawn trilogy novels being written by Timothy Zahn. And George Lucas, by 1994, he realized that there was still a massive audience for his films and was ready to make a new film. He began writing in November of 1994. He based his screenplay over a 15-page outline he originally wrote in 1976 to help keep track of characters' backstories. Couple of things to note. Anakin was originally written to be 12, but he reduced his age to 9 because he felt Anakin being affected by separation from his mother at a much younger age would better serve his eventual downfall. Um, They actually had to change Anakin's dialogue in many scenes in order to reflect it. The film's original title was set to be The Beginning, but Lucas changed it to The Phantom Menace before filming was even completed. The title. So the most direct one is that Palpatine is posing as a well-meaning and benevolent senator, when in reality he's actually an evil and calculating Sith Lord. And there's other pieces of Phantom Menace too, like the fact that Darth Maul is constantly in the shadows until the end, and some people have even said that like Padme being like hidden throughout the film, only to reveal that she's Queen Amidala at the end is sort of a Phantom Menace thing. I don't know if I would agree with that, but still, there were a ton of big name directors that Lucas wanted to direct the film. Some of them, among others, there's Ron Howard. Ron Howard is a big name director. He actually directed Solo: A Star Wars Story, and his daughter Bryce Dallas is heavily involved in the productions of the Disney Plus series coming out now. Plus, she also voiced Yaddle in Tales of a Jedi. Other ones include Robert Zemeckis. Most people should know who Robert Zemeckis is, and Steven Spielberg, because Lucas and Spielberg are really good friends, but they turned it down because they felt that the project was too daunting, and Lucas eventually agreed to direct. The film's producer was Rick McCallum. He had worked with Lucas on both the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, a little short series all about. It's like a prequel to the Indiana Jones movies, and he originally tested the new digital technology that they wanted to use on the special editions. No matter what you think of those, Lucas wanted the film to be more stylistically different from the original trilogy because he wanted to portray a richer and more like a period piece, since it was a history leading up to A New Hope. We had many of the new aliens and creatures were designed by a zoologist named Terriel Wittalach. Sorry if I mispronounced that name. They're hybrids of real animals and given designs to reflect their environment. And because society was more sophisticated compared to the time of the original trilogy, they wanted more elaborate costume designs. Over 1,000 of them were created, inspired by various cultures. The fight scenes were done by Nick Gillard. He was a stuntman. He had worked with Lucas on several occasions on the original trilogy and the Indiana Jones trilogy. He actually has a brief speaking role in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Lucas has said that he was seeking a much faster and more intense lightsaber fight style to depict Jedi in their prime years. There were a ton of different sword fighting techniques that Gillard incorporated, like kendo and kinjitsu, as well as other swinging techniques like tennis and tree chopping. Believe it or not, unlike in the previous films where they used wireworks to portray the Force jump, air rams were actually used to shoot the actors up into the air because Gillard didn't think that the wires were too realistic. Here are some interesting casting decisions, and I'm kind of wondering what Riz feels about this. Samuel L. Jackson was quickly offered the role of Mace Windu, as we know, because he expressed interest in appearing in a Star Wars movie. But someone who was originally considered for the role was the man, the myth, the legend, one of the greatest rappers of all time, Tupac. Tupac was considered for Mace Windu. That's absolutely insane. Probably wouldn't have minded. I'm not sure when Tupac died, but would they have had to recast him? Because he might have.
Probably.
Yeah, that would have been insane.
I mean, I don't know when Tupac died. He died in '96, so he had to die beforehand.
Okay.
But
Okay, then yeah, he wouldn't have been able to be in this movie then.
but if Tupac had somehow lived long enough, I honestly would probably still have preferred Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like, Samuel L. Jackson was made for that role.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So here's an interesting thing about Darth Maul. I'm not sure who originally was supposed to play him, but so Ray Park, he's not really much of an actor. He's more of a martial artist. He's a gymnast, sword fighter, mostly a stunt guy. So he was originally brought on by Gillard to help him just coordinate the stunts and everything. And Gillard had him dress up like Maul and film him doing some stunts to demonstrate his ideas for the fighting scenes. But Lucas and McCallum really liked him as Darth Maul, so they just decided to keep him as Darth Maul. Um, but they did have to dub over his voice. That's actually not Ray Park talking. They thought his voice was too squeaky, so his voice is dubbed over by Peter Serafinowicz. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But yeah, Ray Park was definitely cool there. I'm not sure if this led him. The only other role that I know where he's had any lines was when he played Toad in the original X-Men movie. But yeah,
I forgot they had Toad the original movie until right now. Oh my god.
Yeah, but Ray Park played him too.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did.
Holy crap, okay.
In fact, they actually kind of do a bit of a homage to him when he's fighting Storm in that movie, where he kicks a pole and so he can pick it up, and then he swings it around like he's doing the Darth Maul lightsaber thing. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Yeah. Keira Knightley, she's a big Star Wars fan. She sought a role. Her parents, objected to it. But she was given the role mostly due to her resemblance to Natalie Portman. What's funny is that literally Keira Knightley's own mother couldn't tell the difference between her and Natalie Portman when they were in costume, though apparently she had a very uncomfortable experience in the costumes. The role of Anakin was auditioned for by many actors, some of whom, two of whom at least, are pretty big names. We have Haley Joel Osment. Haley Joel Osment he would actually become a really big name after 1999 because he had a groundbreaking role in the sci-fi horror movie The Sixth Sense, and most people should know who Haley Joel Osment is. And then the other person was Justin Burfield. He played the older brother Reese on Malcolm in the Middle. But then Jake Lloyd ultimately got cast. Apparently Michael Jackson, yes, Michael Jackson, the king of pop himself, he expressed interest in playing Jar Jar Binks, but they turned him down because apparently Michael Jackson wanted to do it. He wanted to play Jar Jar Binks in prosthetic makeup, while Lucas wanted Jar Jar filmed entirely in CGI. Not sure how I would feel about Michael Jackson playing Jar Jar Binks, but
I don't know about that one.
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap up some of the history stuff, filming took place at a number of locations. Much like the original trilogy, Tatooine scenes were filmed in the Tunisian desert. Tunisian, sorry.
Sorry, I had to correct you on that.
Yeah, sorry about that. And the Naboo Royal Palace was filmed at the Palace of Caserta in Italy. Apparently, which I really want to visit that location now just to see what the real Theed Palace looks like, because they didn't really make that many changes, but for 4 days straight, they had the whole building just closed off to visitors just so they could film there. And all forest scenes were filmed in Hertfordshire in England, while the rest of the interior scenes were filmed in a studio also in the UK. And this film saw a massive use of CGI, with many shots having visual effects.
One quick note that I probably mentioned in a previous podcast, but I honestly don't remember. So I'm going to say it again, just in case anyone listening to this has any interest in this. I think in 2026, I don't remember exactly when, but there's going to be another solar eclipse, and it'll pass over the European side more than the American side. So this past, a month ago, we had a solar eclipse here in America. It was totality over Texas, so where I am, 2 hours west of me. apparently, the Tunisian desert where they filmed Tatooine scenes will have totality for this upcoming solar eclipse. So if you have any interest in visiting Tatooine and seeing a solar eclipse at the same time, this is made for you.
That would be awesome.
And I'm honestly considering it because I'm that much of a nerd. And also, who wouldn't want to go to Tunisia?
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, hey, travel, see cool stuff, have fun stuff. Sounds like a fun time.
But before we jump into the plot of the movie, one other thing I really want to talk about here, mostly because I got kind of reminded about this because before the film actually started on the screen, they actually showed some old nostalgic commercials, for like the Phantom Menace in like the trailer section before the film started, which that kind of really reminded me like this is something I really want to talk about. It's very I don't think we can talk about this movie without talking about just like how big of like an event this movie was being made out to be because like and even though like I remember a little bit more with Attack of the Clones because I was like 8 when Attack of the Clones came out, so I kind of remember that a bit more vividly. But I still remember this partially with like just how much buildup this movie was getting. Like the marketing, like you could not go anywhere in the world without being reminded that this movie would come out. Like there were there was a whole new toy line, and like all the toys being released were just absolutely insane. Like a new Hasbro line. Like everywhere I went, like there was always like several aisles dedicated to the Star Wars toys, and I always had to come out of a toy store with a new Star Wars toy, like action figures, role playing items. I got a lot of the role playing items when I was a kid too. Almost every fast food joint like had some type of like Star Wars memorabilia, like like different types of cups based on characters. Like I actually remember Star Wars explaining his wife and like a couple of other people who went into the movie. They came with like these memorabilia cups, like these cups based on characters like Newt Gunray and other people like Watto and all that. There were different novelizations for the films, and the novels all had like a different cover. Like there was one with Maul, there was one with Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan. There was a book series, which I remember reading a handful of them. The Jedi Apprentice series. It was like a little YA novel series about like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's adventures before the events of the film. There was like a number of video games released, like one for like the Battle for Naboo. Um, there was a obviously a game based on the film itself, which is actually kind of an infamous game. You should probably look on like how that infamous that game is on YouTube to get more details. But there were God knows how many video games based on the pod racing scenes, like and another huge thing, like this film was like so big with its advertising that it literally played into the advertising of other movies because this is one of my favorite film trailers of all time. So there's a film trailer that starts off where it was coming out the same year for a film that came out the same year as this. It's a film where it starts off, it shows like this cute destroyed ship in the middle of space with like Star Wars music playing in the background. And then and then the narrator says, years ago, a battle was fought and an empire was destroyed. Now the saga continues. And there's this chair where this guy, his back is to the camera, and you can tell from like the bald head, but it's kind of meant to be Darth Vader. But then the chair turns around and there's Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies there. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Were you expecting someone else?" It's a trailer for the second Austin Powers movie. That is how big this movie was. It played into the advertisement of other movies.
Yeah, I remember that commercial when it came out. And I also want to mention a little fun story I haven't had a chance to tell you yet, Nathan.
Go ahead.
So, for those of you that follow my Instagram, Rizlord7, shameless plug for today, part 1 possibly, maybe have more later, we'll see. a friend of mine just gifted me a Nintendo 64 as a housewarming gift because he came to my house to visit, and that was what he decided to give me. So clearly, I had to go buy some games, and we have a little store nearby. And so I went there. They had like all this old retro games. It's a really awesome store. And I go to the N64 area, and there at the bottom is a full catalog of Star Wars N64 games. So they got Shadow of the Empire, Rogue Squadron, Episode 1 Racer, which is like a pod racing game, and then Episode 1 Battle for Naboo. So when you mentioned the pod racer game, I just had to mention, hey, I saw that cartridge earlier today, and I have plans to go back and buy it later on just so I have it. But I think it's pretty cool that they had all this stuff come out because I remember seeing the pod racer game when it was a big deal back then, and I remember a lot of my friends were playing it, but I didn't have an N64. I was more of a Sony kid growing up.
Yeah.
So I never really had a chance to play it, so I'm kind of curious to try it out now. But yeah, no, there was a lot of stuff coming out for it. I remember so many commercials, like the Doctor Strange one, not Doctor Strange, Doctor Evil. Is that his name? Yeah,
Doctor Evil.
I have not seen Austin Powers in like 2 decades, probably.
Yeah, I know.
Um, but yeah, no. So like, there's so much stuff that came out around that time, and honestly, I don't know. I was a little bit older, Nate. So for me, I was. It was kind of cool to see it happen and be able to understand it to a certain degree. I mean, I wasn't like super old, but I was like, maybe 10 years old or something. And all I could understand was Star Wars movies haven't been made in a long time. This is a big deal for the older fans who were like growing up with it.
Yep.
Everyone's hyped. There was like news articles on CNN and stuff with people camping out for the midnight premiere a day or two before. They had all the typical stories about stuff like that. And it felt like a renaissance era for Star Wars as we kind of got something new finally after, a decade and a half of no movies, no real content outside of the books. And so there is a level of excitement that hasn't really gone away. I mean, it died out again after episode 3, I think, for a little while and came back when the sequels began. But I don't think even when the sequel era began that it was as hype or as well marketed as it was for the Phantom Menace and the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I feel like the hype. Now, granted, I was just 8 years old, and believe it or not, I had no idea how negative the reaction was to the Phantom Menace. At the time, so I was pretty naive, but I felt like I could feel the hype a lot more when they were getting ready to release Attack of the Clones. Like that also felt like a major event, and I'll talk more about that in the next podcast.
Yeah.
But like it felt like a huge event to the point where literally other movies coming out that year are trying to like bring up the hype for that movie to advertise their movie.
I mean, Star Wars to this day is probably the most successful and popular franchise aside from like Pokemon or something.
Yeah. I mean, literally in that trailer, there's one point where like the announcer says, if you see only one movie this year, see, well, okay, Star Wars. But if you see a second movie, see Austin Powers. So, yeah, that's one of the best movie trailers ever. I love that.
I mean, I don't blame it.
Yeah, and honestly, looking back at that, I should probably try to read the Jedi Apprentice novels again. Like they're really short novels. Maybe I'll read the whole thing and then like do a review on the podcast. But that's something for a different time. But with that said, let's jump into the plot. Unless Riz has anything else to say.
No, I'm good. Just one quick side note for those that are listening to this podcast as it comes out. Like Nathan said, it is May 19th, 2024. And I'm looking at local show times online right now for my local area in Houston. And we have Phantom Menace showings up until later this week. So if you didn't go see Phantom Menace already in theaters and you want to go see it, it may still be playing where you are. So I would recommend check it out because we have multiple theaters out here still playing it.
Yeah, same here in Atlanta. So definitely get on it.
Yeah, so I actually might go do that now that I'm feeling better. I was sick on my force. I couldn't really go out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you should totally go see it again then.
Yeah, so I'm considering it now just because.
Okay, anyway, so to jump in, we are in the Star Wars timeline, we are 32 years before A New Hope, that being 32 BBY, and in the midst of a political dispute between the Trade Federation, that's a big trade franchise owned by the they don't officially say it here in the movie, but we can probably assume based on expanded universe material that we get later that it's like owned by the people of Cato Nemoidia, because the higher ups there are Nemoidians. The Trade Federation has invaded the sovereign world of Naboo. Tensions have risen over a trade dispute. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson, and his young apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Ewan McGregor. They were originally sent to resolve the dispute as ambassadors for the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. They attempt to escort Naboo's Queen Amidala to Coruscant to attempt to rally the Republic to Naboo's aid. But they're forced to briefly land on Tatooine when their ship is damaged, and they encounter a 9-year-old boy named Anakin Skywalker, played by Jake Lloyd. He offers to help them get the money for their parts to repair their ship. But Qui-Gon senses Anakin's strength in the Force and leverages Anakin's master, the Todarian Watto, to free Anakin after he wins a pod race that gives them the money to fix their ship. Anakin leaves with the crew, but they get attacked by Darth Maul. Darth Maul is the apprentice of Darth Sidious. I'll talk a little bit more on that in a second. Qui-Gon realizes that the situation is much more complicated. On Coruscant, Amidala attempts to rally the Republic to Naboo's cause, but corruption in the Senate, leaves the Supreme Chancellor Valorum very little power to do anything. Valorum is actually played by Terrence Stamp. Most people would know Terrence Stamp from playing General Zod in the original, in the first two Superman movies, the two good ones from the Christopher Reeve series. With encouragement of Sheev Palpatine, he's the senator of Naboo, who is also secretly the evil Darth Sidious. Amidala calls for a vote of no confidence. She forces the election of a new chancellor, Palpatine being nominated. But with the Republic powerless, Amidala returns home to retake Naboo by force. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan accompany her, and thanks to the help of a Gungan creature named Jar Jar Binks, Amidala is able to rally the grand army of his people, the Gungans, to their cause, and they help them rise up against the Trade Federation to retake Naboo. But during the fight, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan face off against Darth Maul in a deadly lightsaber duel that ends with Obi-Wan defeating the Sith Lord, but Qui-Gon gets killed. The day is ultimately saved by Anakin when he destroys the Trade Federation's flagship, which causes the droid army to completely shut down. Naboo is saved. Obi-Wan is giving permission to train Anakin. He gave the word to Qui-Gon that he would. And Palpatine is elected Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. But unfortunately, the Jedi Order now knows that somewhere in the galaxy, another Sith Lord is lurking in the shadows, waiting for the chance to strike. And the film cleverly lets us know exactly who this is. Like there's this point, like the very last dialogue in the movie is Yoda saying, "Always two there are, a master and apprentice." And then Mace Windu says, "But which was destroyed, the master or the apprentice?" And then it slowly pans over to Palpatine, and that's how the film ends. So before we talk, do we want to talk about how we feel about the plot real quick, Riz?
Yeah, so I want to park here for a little bit actually and talk about the plot. And I guess as we talk about the plot, we can start talking about characters, just kind of see how it goes. But
Yeah.
you know, one thing that if you're into Star Wars fandom at all, you will know that most people regarded The Phantom Menace as one of the worst movies in the prequel trilogy, and quite frankly, across all of the Star Wars movies up until the sequels came out. And then we have new debates about which is the worst movie with the sequels in play, but that's a whole nother topic. So I I was one of those people that saw episode one again when it first came out in, many, many moons ago. And I, as a kid, thought, oh, it's a cool movie. I like it. It has a lot of fun. Got some action. It's a good movie. I actually didn't understand any of the politics. Like, I didn't understand the trade dispute. I didn't understand them calling for, like, the Valerum being incompetent and that they're replacing him with Palpatine. All that political stuff went over my head as a kid. And honestly, I never cared about it even as I got older until I started watching the Clone Wars. And I was like, oh, wait, this is all really important stuff that I should probably understand better than I do. And so it's a movie that's grown with me in a weird way because the story has to grow with the audience, I feel. So if you're in my opinion, and again, this is strictly my opinion, has nothing to do with Jedi Squadron opinion, Nathan's opinion, or anything else.
Yeah.
But my opinion is, if you're one of the people that didn't like the Phantom Menace movie and you're calling it one of the worst, I'm starting to wonder, watching the movie again recently, is it because you were not able to follow all the politics? And I know there's the obvious answer to everyone hating on a certain character who talks like a crazy man. And of course, that beats Jar Jar Binks. He got a lot of hate. We'll talk about
Like a
that
what?
a lot later on as well. But yeah, I know there's that. I know there's Kid Anakin played by Jake Lloyd. People didn't like that, but I think those are like excuses for the bigger picture of them not following the politics here, in my opinion. Because there's a lot of politics at play here that really make the movie a lot more intriguing if you really stop and think about it.
Yeah. So I have to agree with that too. I mean, in all honesty, like I said, when I was a kid, I I honestly didn't know until like long after Revenge of the Sith came out that like people actually were hating on the prequels. Probably just because I was. I mean, I wasn't even a teenager when Revenge of the Sith came out, so I was just like this naive little kid who didn't really have any idea. Like, I was never on the internet looking at YouTube comment sections or forums, so I had no idea. And I personally, when I did watch this movie, because I watched it for the first time when uh, my parents bought it for me on VHS, so I could watch it shortly after the film had left theaters. And I remember liking it pretty good. I enjoyed a lot of the fight scenes, and I thought Obi-Wan was a really cool character. I do remember still that I kind of gravitated toward wanting to watch the original trilogy a bit more, but I don't remember ever hating this. Now, keep in mind, I was like 5 or 6, so I didn't really have much of any thought on my critical thinking skills at the time. I, but looking at it now as an adult, I don't see how people can make this movie out to be like a really horrible movie. And I honestly, part of me feels like maybe this came out at the wrong time because like there are other movies and shows that come out that have higher emphasis on like political stuff that are acclaimed now. Like, I mean, okay, I know this isn't really the best example because now of how the show is looked at, but like Game of Thrones is a show with like a lot of massive political talk, at least as far as I know. I haven't watched the show all the way through yet, but there's like a lot of like political talk and like, political disputes all throughout Game of Thrones. And at
Don't
least
finish it.
yeah, I know. At least for a while, until maybe the last season, 2 or 3 seasons. But even when the season, like the first 4 seasons, which are considered like the glorious years of that show, it was rich with political talk. So part of me just wonders, maybe if this film got released in like the 2010s, there might have been a bigger appetite for the political stuff. Because
No, I don't think it was the timing. I think if you look back at it, and this is something that I would love to pull a good friend of mine on here, you know who I'm talking about, to
yeah,
hear the perspective of what it was like as an older fan back then. But honestly, I don't think it was the wrong time for the politics of the movie. I think people just came into this movie with their own preconceived notion of what to expect and what they wanted. And George Lucas is not well known for giving people what they want. He gives them what he thinks they need, if that makes sense.
yeah,
And he's always done that. From the day one, he's done that. So, no, I don't think it was that it was the wrong time. I thought it was the perfect time because any time for the
okay,
story is perfect. But I think it's people were looking for a more direct connection to the Skywalkers. They were wanting to see, like, yeah, obviously we know it's Anakin Skywalker. He'll become Darth Vader one day. But they didn't like seeing him as a child. I think they wanted to jump right into him being a Jedi in the Academy. And I think they wanted to jump right into the action. But like we say in many other podcasts across our many podcasts that we do run in Anime Secrets, um, there will be times where you have to have a portion of a story be a story builder to set up a later piece. And in my opinion, Phantom Menace is setting up the world so that you can better enjoy and understand when things do get to that point where you do see the Clone Wars, where you do see Anakin rising to become Darth Vader, where you do see, Palpatine descent into being this diabolical creature that he becomes later on. So it's all about expectations and how to manage them. And I don't think the fandom back then was correctly managing their expectation. But I also don't know that for certain because, again, I was too young to understand it.
yeah, and that might be another reason why I didn't really hate this movie too much, because I was too old, I was too young to really have any expectations and be like one of those diehard fans. Like I want to see like, Anakin be like an adult and like, he kicks all kinds of butt and all that. Like I honestly like, maybe that's why, this movie just sat with me a lot better than, other audiences.
Well, okay, to be completely honest with you, I did go through that phase in the middle from when I first saw the movie many moons ago and today, where I just did not like episode one, two, and three. And that's because I joined the fandom bandwagon for a good while saying,
So did I.
no, screw these movies, they're not good. Screw Jar Jar Binks, he's not good. Screw Jake Lloyd, he's not a good actor, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, looking back at it now, I mean, I just watched the movie this morning again. And I gotta tell you, I mean, yeah, Jar Jar Binks' way of speaking and the Gungan way of speaking is probably a little annoying. But is it really any more annoying than some of the other creatures we had in the original trilogy?
I mean, I remember being annoyed by Jar Jar Binks when I was a kid, but he never really ruined the movie for me. And I agree with you, Riz. Like, I hated these movies for a bit, and well, okay, I didn't really hate them, but I was kind of like, I guess I was just kind of giving into peer pressure, and I had just convinced myself, well, okay, if everybody else hates these movies, then they have to be bad. So I'm just going to convince myself that they're bad. And if you want to have any idea of like how I feel, you should go on our now defunct channel, the Otaku Sentai Digiranger, where we were reviewing some of the Star Wars movies before The Force Awakens comes out, because I I tend to be a little too harsh on those movies. Keep in mind I was like 21 at the time, so
Luckily,
Like,
those videos are gone.
oh, thank God. Okay, cool.
Yeah, some background information. Frank and I nuked it a couple of months ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but no, I mean, yeah, this movie, it was a cool thing to hate on it, and I didn't watch episode one again after like early college until this morning. So it had been maybe 7, 8 years since I last saw the movie. And, knowing everything I did today, having seen the Clone Wars, having seen Rebels, having seen, the stuff in the New Republic with the Mandalorian universe stuff, knowing all that stuff, I just look back at this movie and I'm like, dang, this one event where the Trade Federation puts a blockade on Naboo is the singular event we can point back to that's set in motion all of this other stuff that happened throughout Star Wars, even up until the end of Episode 9. Like, it's all comes back to this one moment.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it goes back a little bit further back if you want to talk about Count Dooku stuff prior to all of this, because I think that also plays a big part of it. And at some point, Lucas and Disney and whoever else is listening to this podcast, I really want a Tales of the Sith.
Yeah.
Because I want to see Palpatine before all of this stuff, before episode 1. I want to see what he's like. I want to see what he's doing.
Yeah, there is a novel that came out shortly after Revenge of the Sith came out called Plagueis, which goes into detail about his life as Plagueis' apprentice, but it's a Legends novel, although some elements from that book have been canonized since, but the whole book itself isn't
Right.
canon. I hear that that's Legends Essentials, though. I might actually want to take a look at that novel at some point, but I would definitely love to see the canon version of
Yeah.
Plagueis. And heck, I mean, if they just want to let James Luceno, that's the man who wrote the book, and he's writing Star Wars books these days too. Like, he wrote the Tarkin novel. Like, if they just want to let James Luceno just write a new Plagueis novel that's like roughly the same thing, kind of like how the beginning of Thrawn, like in the beginning of the original Thrawn book, the way that Thrawn joins the Empire is literally pretty much almost a note for note thing, the same as how he joins the Empire in Legends. If they just want to do that, I'd be down for it because I hear it's a really good novel.
I mean, I'm down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to say, I think this movie gets a lot of unnecessary flack, and I think my points can be better illustrated now by hitting some of these characters that we're going to talk about, like start talking about them.
Yeah. And so let's start off with Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you want to say about
We'll make-
Qui-Gon, Riz?
So Qui-Gon, okay, so I'm going to be pulling in some knowledge about Qui-Gon from the entirety of the canon universe that I've seen him, portrayed in.
Yep.
Qui-Gon is a character that is well known in the Jedi Order to be kind of that rebellious character. He's not really the conventional Jedi. He doesn't do things exactly the Jedi way. He'll bend the rules. He'll deviate a little bit here and there. He likes to push the bounds of what's there while still being a good person. And you can see this a lot in the Phantom Menace movie, especially on Tatooine, because there is no way a Jedi other than Qui-Gon and maybe Obi-Wan and later Anakin would have been brave enough to have made a bet with Watto and then make a second bet with Watto. And then, well, he made a third bet, right? Like, he made 3 bets with Watto in the span of like 5 minutes across the movie.
Yeah, it was either one or two bets.
Yeah, so he made a couple of bets with the guy, just to get what he wanted. And he bet stuff that it didn't really belong to him, belonged to Naboo, belonged to Amidala and Padme. So he was kind of just doing things in his own way. And that is a very interesting Jedi to focus on here, because if you're looking at this in the context of what Jedi have we seen thus far in Star Wars on the big screen? So far you've seen Obi-Wan Kenobi as an old man, and he's a bit more of that sage mentor type person. Yoda is implied to have been the sage mentor person as well at one point, but he's kind of devolved into a bit of insanity from smoking the fumes on that planet he was stuck on.
Yeah.
Um, so seeing Qui-Gon kind of break the mold of being that sage Jedi Knight master type person and doing things in his own way with his own personality and own unique take is not a bad thing, honestly. And he's very headstrong. And it's kind of funny that he is all this stuff, because if you look at the lineage of Master, it goes Yoda, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka. And
It goes Yoda, Dooku, Qui-Gon,
you're
so on and so
right.
forth.
You're right. Yeah. I forgot about Dooku. You're right.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, so I mean, all these people in the lineage are all big players in the Star Wars universe, and they're all like just genuinely different type of characters. Because, for the most part, um, other Jedi Masters that we get more detail on in the Clone Wars animated TV show, they have their personalities, but they all kind of stick with the Jedi dogma a lot closer, I feel, than these guys did.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention that because, like, I heard, and I think this was Lucas's intention. Qui-Gon was kind of meant like, and this is one of the reasons why his death is actually kind of a huge deal in the move. Well, okay, his death is a huge deal for obvious reasons, but even from a symbolic perspective, it's really huge because Qui-Gon, you're saying that like he's an unconventional Jedi. Qui-Gon is, meant to kind of represent like the Jedi of like an older way of thinking, and this is more fleshed out if you've read, like, not even read books, just seen tales of a Jedi. Like, he comes from a Jedi master who deviated from the council really heavily. Like, while the council is too busy just kind of doing the work of the Senate, Qui-Gon comes from a master who kind of abides by a more like old-fashioned mentality of you don't work for you don't work for the Senate, you serve the people of this republic. And that was always kind of the mindset that they were trying to convey with Qui-Gon. And when he dies, that's like a huge symbol of like how the last of what could remain of the Jedi's old mentality is also dying, and that's what's going to lead to their destruction, eventual destruction, which is going to happen in 13 years from now. Sure, Obi-Wan might tend to lean a bit toward Qui-Gon's mentality, but even Obi-Wan is ultimately someone who kind of ultimately he does kind of go with what the council says, because I went into some detail on how Obi-Wan is someone who disagrees with the council but ultimately kind of goes through with what they say, but then not always. Like, he probably voted for Ahsoka's expulsion during the Clone Wars, but he may not have necessarily agreed, but he ultimately kind of goes by the idea that the council knows. Like, you get what I'm trying to say? Like, Qui-Gon was the last of like the true type of Jedi mindset where we shouldn't be listening to what the Senate says. We should be serving the people of this republic. And sometimes the council, even though they are wise, they are not always correct.
No, and I definitely think that's the correct way to look at it. And that's definitely Qui-Gon in a nutshell, because that's what Dooku was like. And honestly, I still think Dooku could have stayed good if he was allowed to have raised the questions and fought on the side of the everyday person rather than fighting for the Senate's need.
Mm-hmm. And I really like Qui-Gon's relationship with Obi-Wan, how they tend to clash a lot. Like the two have a very and we can also kind of segue into Obi-Wan through this as well. But like I read again, I want to read the Jedi Apprentice novels. I should probably get back. I do know in Legends that Obi-Wan is Qui-Gon's third Padawan. Like he had one Padawan, we don't really know much about him, but then there was a second Padawan. His name was Xanatos. Yes, I think it was Xanatos. Yes, the same name as the main villain from the Gargoyles animated series. Who uh, and they revolve heavily around the story in the second novel. Xanatos fell to the dark side, and after Xanatos fell to the dark side, Qui-Gon swore off of never taking a Padawan, but was eventually convinced to take Obi-Wan. That doesn't exist in Legends, but I have read this one novel called Master and Apprentice, which is written by who's, in my opinion, the best Star Wars writer active right now, Claudia Gray, which revolves around their relationship of like who it takes place 7 years before the Phantom Menace. It goes into a lot more detail on their relationship, where Qui-Gon is, kind of someone who walks a very fine line, but ultimately he is a light Jedi and he's nowhere near going to, turn to the dark side. But he does kind of, live his life a little on the edge of like what the council wants to say, while Obi-Wan is a bit more direct. But at the same time, the two have a lot of mutual respect for each other because Qui-Gon even says this in the movie, like he thinks Obi-Wan is a great Jedi, and there's stuff and Obi-Wan has a lot of potential. And Obi-Wan, as we'll see in the prequel, and as we'll see in the later prequels, and like how he often talks about Qui-Gon, and not just the rest of the prequel movies, but even to some extent in the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan can tell that like Qui-Gon Jinn is a very unique Jedi master, and he's lucky to have someone like Qui-Gon. And I don't know, just reading that novel several years later and then finally rewatching this movie again, like I don't know, that makes the book that I read a bit more special. And I'm gonna take a look at it on the podcast again, but I feel like the relationship that they build up to in that book is portrayed pretty perfectly here in the film.
Yeah, definitely. This is all stuff I never knew before. I didn't know he had other Padawans prior to Obi-Wan.
Just in Legends, though, not canon.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised in Legends that he had more than one
Yeah.
because Legends did a lot of stuff.
Do we want to segue over to Obi-Wan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Obi-Wan is not the Obi-Wan we left in A New Hope when he died. This is a much younger Obi-Wan. I mean, not really that much younger if you really look at the timeline, but he's a lot younger. He's a lot more um, reckless in a way, and he's still learning how to be a Jedi. Whereas the Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, he's that sage, wise man that you've known to love and respect. So it's very interesting seeing Obi-Wan in this position as a Padawan. And honestly, where Obi-Wan is right now in the movie, I think if people had seen Anakin here first in that role as a Padawan, things would have been a lot better for the movie and the reception. But that's neither here nor there. Obi-Wan, I thought, was interesting because he doesn't really get a ton of screen time here because it's mainly Qui-Gon doing stuff with Obi-Wan in the background. But it is still nice to see that Obi-Wan has some. He kind of defies the order a little bit, like how Qui-Gon does, not quite as much. Like he tries telling Yoda in the council meeting, "But I am ready to take the trials. I can do it." And Yoda's like, "No, we will not take your word on this. We will decide on our own." So it is nice to see that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan do have that bond, and they can kind of agree on a game plan, even if the game plan does not adhere to what Jedi Order wants. So it's a good foundation for him. Again, we don't really get a lot of Obi-Wan like I would have wanted to, but we have 2 more movies to kind of get that filled.
Yeah, I think this is more of just like setting the groundwork for Obi-Wan's character. You know, he had a Jedi Master Qui-Gon was not who was much more like unconventional as a Jedi Master, and he didn't always agree with what Qui Gon had to say. But this lays the groundwork for his relationship with Anakin because he he is training Anakin because he has Qui Gon Jinn, who was like a father to him, and he made a promise to Qui Gon on his deathbed that he would train Anakin to the point where he's ready to defy the Council, as he says to Yoda at the end of the movie. So yeah, it's mostly just a great setup for it. But I mean, either way, I still do really like Ewan McGregor's performance in this movie. Like, this is exactly how I would imagine someone like Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan, being, where he does have like the calm, cool, and collected nature of Alec Guinness is Obi-Wan, but he's still someone who's ultimately just kind of learning. And so he's not immediately like the wise old sage of a Jedi Master that we saw him in the original, but he manages to fit the role really perfectly. Like I can't see I don't know who else auditioned for the role, other than, well, okay, I think there was like 1 or 2 actors who I don't know who their names are, but I can't unsee anyone other than Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan. And for the record, I can't see anyone other than Liam Neeson playing Qui-Gon either. Like, they were just perfect casting decisions, in my opinion.
They really were, and it's so cool to me that unlike Alec Guinness, these 2 guys are very, very close to the Star Wars fandom and to the Star Wars franchise, and they're willing to come back however they can, whenever they can, no questions asked, it feels like.
Yeah, especially Liam Neeson. Like, he apparently loved playing Qui-Gon so much that like he'll come back to play like, I'm pretty sure he's voiced Qui-Gon in like every situation. Like when Qui-Gon appears in this one flashback, and it was either a flashback or a vision, I can't remember, in the 2003 Clone Wars series. Liam Neeson voices him there, and I know Qui-Gon appeared like once or twice in the Clone Wars series, and to my knowledge, that's Liam Neeson voicing him.
Yeah, I think it is. I would be surprised if it were not.
He came back to play Qui-Gon for literally like 30 seconds in the Kenobi series. So, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a guy who loves playing his role.
And I mean, same with Ewan McGregor. I mean, look at the story you told us at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
That's not a guy who was in it for the money. That's not a guy who was just there to do a job. He was there because he loves the fandom. He loves Star Wars. I mean, he goes to cons all over the place.
Well, he did
And
say in his story that at first he disliked going to cons, like, and this was probably before Disney even bought Star Wars. Like, apparently he had un some really unfortunate experiences. Like, there were apparently people like getting autographed photos from him and then trying to sell them off for like even higher money, and he really didn't like it. But then he was at a Star Wars celebration. I'm pretty sure it was for his going to be on Obi-Wan, and that's when he saw like all these fans just like shaking his hands and like just coming in and welcoming him with so much joy that he was just so overwhelmed. And that's when he realized, wow, this fandom actually does have genuinely great people. I would love to see more of these fans. So
yeah,
it's a very heartwarming story.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I get I get that because a lot of the early cons had a lot of people that did stuff like that. But as the convention circuit got more accessible and we got more of them with better ages and stuff,
Hmm.
I think the experience has improved for them overall.
Yeah. Let's move on to Palpatine.
Yeah, so Palpatine, when I first watched the movie, I didn't really care about him. He was kind of there. As a kid, I didn't understand that he was Darth Sidious in the original trilogy. I didn't know that. I thought he was just some boring old man that was doing some political dribble here and there. But when you take it all into context of the original trilogy, knowing he's Sidious, knowing the entire downfall, I mean, my dude, this character is brilliant because he set up the entire everything to get what he wanted in terms of like, here's the roadmap to setting up the Clone Wars, to setting up the Empire, to setting up everything he wanted from day one. And just watching him orchestrate it all from the background, like, Homeboy knew somehow that Padme and that royal attachment would be able to leave Naboo and eventually make it to Coruscant, and he'd be able to use them to get a vote for no confidence, which would propel him to being one of the two candidates to be the new chancellor. And then in later movies, he does stuff that we're going to talk about in later movies. But yeah, I mean, this guy just had a game plan, and it's almost like David Xanatos from Gargoyles, Nate, where
Yeah.
this guy has a game plan for the game plan, and he's just literally executing Order 66 from the get-go.
Yeah, he totally is. Like, this is, I don't think they do as great of a job with Palpatine in the next movie, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But here, I just think, he's perfectly portrayed. We see him all the time as like this senator who's this supposedly great guy who, is, uh, who's, he's just trying to do well. He loves Naboo and he wants to make sure that Naboo is, you know, going to be safe. But in reality, he's playing this whole thing out. Like, he has staged this trade dispute so that the Trade Federation will, invade Naboo, because he knows that Padme is going to turn to the Senate for help, only for them to not be able to do anything. Like, it's just a massive game of like 4D or maybe even 5D chess, and he's an expert at it at this point, and he's just
Yeah.
doing it all well to where all of this whole thing was just a huge conspiracy for him to become the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, and it works out perfectly. And I think Ian McDiarmid, like, thank God Ian McDiarmid was cast as Palpatine in Return of a Jedi instead of that older guy, because now we can have Ian McDiarmid here, much, roughly at the age where Palpatine would probably be at at this timeline in Star Wars, and we
Mm-hmm.
can see him, play this like really nice, just smiling, like supposedly benevolent senator, while he's also secretly an evil, calculating Sith Lord. Like, we can talk more about Palpatine and his whole motivation when we get to Revenge of the Sith, but like,
Yeah.
this is like, honestly, like, his whole master plan here, and like, how he's not trying to take over the galaxy conventionally, but in like this multi-year plan. That, to me, and the way that you can like see it unfolding when you're watching the film as an adult, that's the reason why I call this film incredibly underrated.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. But yeah, no, that's my thoughts on Palpatine, and you added some really good notes to really flesh out my other thoughts on Palpatine. So,
Yep.
Darth Maul.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Let me say something here.
I go for it.
I love the character of Darth Maul, and I'll have nothing but I've already said some great things about him in our Rebels review, and I'll have some great things to say about him in the Clone Wars, but he's not really a great character here. Like, I constantly compare Darth Maul to like Mr. Freeze, where like, where Maul, the way that he's expanded upon in Clone Wars and Rebels, is kind of like how Mr. Freeze was like recreated in the Batman animated series. Darth Maul here is like Mr. Freeze in like the 1960s Batman series. If we're gonna go with that, the Adam West 1960s Batman series, where much like how Mr. Freeze was just some dude in a suit with a big gun that shoots ice, Maul here, he only has like 4 lines, none of which, give any real motivation. And he's just a dude who looks like the devil and swings around a double-bladed lightsaber, and it's cool, but as far as characterization goes, it's not that much.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot to do with Maul here. The only thing I will say about Darth Maul is he's very menacing, like the title of the movie. Um, he's also got the first on-screen dual lightsaber as far as I know,
Yep.
and probably one of the first in Legends continuity as well. I'd have to imagine.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So that's about it for him. I mean, he gets really fleshed out in Clone Wars. Like, oh my god, that guy really hit it at the park in that one. Like that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But no, Darth Maul here, it's kind of a disappointment. I wish he did more because he's such a good character when Filoni took over and did stuff to him. Honestly, if you ask me, this is not Lucas's character; it's Filoni's character.
Yeah, I've said that. Like,
Yeah,
much like how, Mr. Freeze may have existed before Batman the Animated Series, but no, though Mr. Freeze that we know and love was made in Batman the Animated Series in the same way that, like, the Maul we know and love wasn't created with this movie. It started in the Clone Wars.
yeah, yeah.
What the,
So we're moving on to Anakin next.
yeah. So the Um, one of the things that I might stand by a little bit with some of my negative thoughts on the film, like this is one where I might still stand by what I said in the past. My problem with Anakin in this, and I don't think Jake Lloyd was that terrible of an actor. Like, I don't think Jake Lloyd deserves any of the harassment that he got. Um, I I just think the problem is not so much Jake Lloyd's performance, so much as it's like how Anakin was written here. Because when we see him later on, when he's played by Hayden Christensen, we see a guy who like struggles to like keep his emotions in check, and just tends to like let anger get the best of him and all that. I think the problem I have with Anakin's writing here is that he's just kind of portrayed as like some Gary Stu-esque person. And I realize that there's a reason for that. Like, Qui-Gon is hinting that he's the chosen one and like he's exceptionally strong in the Force. I recognize that. I just wish that there were scenes that like show him not being just this perfect boy who maybe occasionally does some reckless things, like he accidentally starts the ship and then like propels himself up into space. Like, it kind of makes me wish that they kept this deleted scene that they had in the movie. There's a deleted scene that takes place shortly after the pod race where Anakin gets into a fist fight with Greedo. Yeah, that Greedo. Like, Greedo actually does appear in a deleted scene because Greedo accuses him of cheating, and he gets really angry and gets into a fight with Greedo, and Qui-Gon, has to calm him down. I wish they kept that scene in there because that shows that Anakin does have some issues where like anger can like get the better of him and all that. Like, I don't know, it's just hard to see this Anakin grow into the Hayden Christensen Anakin, and even more importantly, like the awesome like Matt Land, like the Lander guy who voiced Anakin in the Clone Wars. Just seeing him grow into that Anakin, I just wish this movie showed more of the planting of the seeds of Anakin becoming that Anakin, because I don't think this movie did that good of a job at showcasing that.
Well, okay, that's a lot to unpack, and I don't wholly agree with that. So let me try and break it down and give my perspective. So for me, I thought, first of all, Anakin as a kid here is what I would expect Anakin as a kid to be, based on what we saw in episode 2 and 3, and even the Clone Wars. Because Anakin, like you mentioned, in the remainder of the franchise until the Vader days, he's kind of broken. He has a lot of hate and anger built up inside him. But the reason he has that anger inside him is because, okay, so let's back up a little bit here and look at Anakin's story in the movie, and then I'll get to my point. Anakin in this movie is kind of portrayed as a happy-go-lucky kid who is a slave to Watto, and his mom's a slave as well. And he does some pod racing, he does some fixing of droids and equipment, and he's all that stuff. And he's a goofy, happy-go-lucky kid. I mean, literally, there's a scene where Watto says, "Go back and fix something," and he's like, "Yippee! I can go home after this." He's a happy-go-lucky kid. He has no care in the world. He knows his place. He knows he's a slave. He understands all that. He's okay with it. He's content. And then what happens? Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan sew up. Qui-Gon figures out he might have force potential, gets him tested. He's like, "Oh my god, you have way more midichlorians than anyone else in the entirety of people I know in the Order. So we need to take you here and get you tested further and get you inducted into the Jedi Order. And here's a plot I'm going to enact to get you out of slavery into the Jedi Order to get you inducted." So in doing so, he loses the stability of his life where he knows what he's doing every day, fixing stuff, being a happy-go-lucky kid, and has to go onto not on a global scale, a galactic scale, and join the Jedi Order, who is at the precipice of a civil war with the Separatist Union and the Republic. And he has to grapple with all that while also dealing with the fact that they couldn't enact a plan to get his mom. And up until he left the planet, honestly, his mom was the thing grounding the kid, because every kid is grounded by their mom or their dad, depending on the circumstance. More likely than not, the mom, unless the mom's out of the picture for reasons. So, to me, it makes sense that Anakin is kind of taken away abruptly from without not really much time to really think about it, to leave, go with Qui-Gon, and become part of the Jedi Order. And it's not even a seamless transition. It's not like Qui-Gon said, "Hey, you're in the Jedi Order," and it was an easy road from there. He literally gets to the temple and hears these really amazing Jedi like Mace Windu and Yoda tell him, "No, we're not going to train you. You're too old. You're not the right fit." So this kid's already kind of thinking, "Okay, what am I doing here? I literally had to leave everything I knew, all the comforts I had at home, to come to this new foreign place, and they're telling me I'm not even worth it. I'm not even somebody they want to train." And then Obi-Wan makes a plea with Yoda saying, "No, I will train him." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, I'm going to train you." But, dude, the seeds of doubt are already there. I mean, he's already feeling like he's not supposed to be there, like he doesn't belong. So, of course, he's going to miss his mom more psychologically, and that's going to haunt him in the background. So, I think this movie did a pretty good job of at least conveying that one thing of, hey, Anakin's messed up. And it's not because he's a messed up kid from before. He got messed up because of what we did to him. I don't know. I talked a lot there. What do you think?
Okay, honestly, I can see more your point. I could definitely can see that. Yeah, he probably would have been a bit more of a happy-go-lucky kid while he was on Tatooine, living with Shmi and being Watto's slave. I guess I do kind of get it. I guess there was just I wish that there were more scenes. And to Lucas's, in the defense of Lucas, I you know I can't see where he would fit these in, but I wish maybe there was like a scene or two to, showcase him, like showing a bit more resentment of, the fact that like he's being like show his reactions to what the Mace Windu and Yoda are saying about him. Like maybe show a scene. There wasn't even a deleted scene, sadly. Like maybe show a scene of like you could cut that scene of Newt Gunray and Palpatine talking, and maybe show a brief scene of him on the ship when they're returning to Naboo, just kind of having resentment, like, wow, I've always wanted to be a Jedi, but here are all the bigger, higher up people saying that like I don't belong, like something to that effect. I kind of wish there was more scenes
Yeah,
of him
they just
like
needed
that.
one scene with him and Qui-Gon after the council scene where Anakin just says, "Hey, that happened. What am I doing here?" That's all you had to do.
Yeah,
And I agree with your point, but I also want to come back and say again, this is all stuff that's typical for a kid to kind of go through that process. Because I don't even think. So I know Anakin was there and he was hearing everything said about him, but I don't think he truly understood and processed it until months, years later, because it's been info dump after info dump. Left Tatooine, went to Coruscant, found out that he could space travel. That's a new thing for him. Coruscant's a crazy planet to drop a backwaters kid onto for a little bit. And then to go from there to Naboo and meet the Gungans? I mean, dude, the Gungans are insane.
yeah,
And then having to go be the one that's in a sip and he inadvertently saved the day by destroying that space station up there orbiting the planet. Like, that's a lot of stuff being thrown in at one point. So, I mean, I give him some credit for not being able to verbalize or even actualize the fact that they were trying to reject him. He's probably just kind of cell shocked by the fact that he could space travel and see this crazy planet like Coruscant because there's nothing like Tatooine at all.
yeah.
So, I get what you're saying. I agree with you, but I'm also throwing out the fact that there's a lot more psychological at play here behind the scenes for Anakin that we probably don't see that we could have seen and could have been told more about. But I think part of movie going is also filling in those blanks a little bit to build your own backstory to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think having that one scene would have helped make the jump a lot easier to get where I got.
Honestly, if they had that one scene that we're talking about, that would probably negate all the complaints I just made about Anakin's character. Like I probably wouldn't even have that thing to say. I kind of
Yeah,
find myself agreeing a lot more. This is the first time I've heard your perspective or a perspective, akin to that at all. So yeah, I'm kind of a little bit more sympathetic to what you're saying now. I just kind of wish that there was a scene more to like
yeah.
maybe adequately communicate that. Then I would probably then everything that I just said would be completely negated.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that. It's a lot to process because again, this movie is a lot deeper than I thought it was. Like when I watched this movie growing up in like 10, 15 years ago, I didn't think it was that deep at all. But looking back at it, this movie is rife with just complexities and stuff that you never think about.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I get it. I really do. Even now, Nate, I'm probably missing stuff that I should have caught just because I haven't spent a lot of time really thinking about the movie yet.
Hmm.
Like, this is the kind of movie we're looking at here, honestly. But that's my Anakin tirade for right now. We might have a part two later on, but we'll see.
Yeah. Do we want to move on to Padme?
Yeah. Padme is. There are two train of thoughts here. The first train is the more positive train, so we're going to start there. I love Padme as a character. She's just a really awesome character here. Um, she doesn't get a ton of stuff to do until the final arc of the movie. Like, she's there with Anakin, kind of helping him be that grounding force that he needs. Oh, another thing. Okay. So, going back to Anakin for a brief second. I hate that I'm doing this, but whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I said Smee grounded him on Tatooine. Padme grounded him after. Like, she was kind of taking the role of Smee for a little bit by comforting him, keeping her with him, keeping him with her. Um, and then he joins the Jedi Order and he loses that too. So I mean, this kid's just getting pummeled from all different directions, man. I mean, this kid's just it sucks to be him right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But going back to Padme, because that's the point here. Padme the entire decoy thing is a really cool idea, and I'm really glad they did it. Because it gave us a chance to really get to know Padme as a human rather than as a ruler. Because Padme, the ruler, is a badass person. Like, she is there to kick ass and take names. Padme, the human, who is the decoy handmaiden, is more humane, more nurturing, more loving, more caring. And honestly, I love that part of her character. Now, with all that said, and pulling in my mini Anakin rant part 1.5 that I just made there about Padme and Anakin, um, I understand in episode 2 and in the later movies that these two will at some point fall in love and have kids because we have to have Luke and Leia somehow. But it still feels a little uncomfortable seeing how hard they kind of push in the direction of a romance where clearly Anakin the kid isn't infatuated with her here. And he's just more of a, okay, this nice woman is being really nice to me and wanting to help me, and I like her. And then Padme being the older mother slash sister figure. Um, I just think that it's a weird dynamic to go between being that nurturing mother sister type figure to also kind of setting up the early seeds for our later romance. It's kind of odd.
I mean, did you really get the idea that Anakin wasn't infatuated with her? I mean, literally the first thing he says to her, which I'm gonna bring up something kind of making fun of that, but like he says, "Are you an angel?" Like that clearly means that like
I
he
mean,
thinks she's beautiful.
I mean, okay, but kids can think people are beautiful without being like infatuated in a romantic way.
I guess, but throughout the movie, he's trying to impress Padme, like he or like show that he like cares about her in a. I don't even think you could say like in a sisterly relationship. Like he takes her to go see C-3PO so he can show, show off to her. You know, he brags about how he's a pilot who's going to one day escape Tatooine. You know, the day, shortly before he goes to the temple, he goes to see Padme so that he can talk with her. That kind of feels like there's some sort of like connection between the two of them.
There, it is there. I'm not disputing that it's not there. What I'm saying is there's two edges to that dagger where on one end you can see it as a kid who just made a new friend and she's being really nice to him because Qui-Gon is kind of being more. Qui-Gon's trying to just ascertain the situation, figure out the midichlorian count, and figure out if this kid's really worth it, while also scheming to get the kid out of here. He's not really spending a lot of personal time with him. So Anakin has made a new friend, and the way I kind of perceive that is one or two ways. Either he's fully in love with her and wants to show off like how you're saying, or he's just super excited like any little kid would be to say, hey, I do all these cool things because I have little nephews and cousins, and when I go to their house, Nate,
Mm-hmm.
there is always this like plan that the kid has ahead of time of like, oh my god, when he gets here, I have to show him my new Lego collection.
Yeah, that's true.
I have to show him all the cool things I've done because I want to impress him and show him how cool I am so that he acknowledges me. So to me, it's two different ways to look at it. One, you could look at it from the romantic way, like you are, or you could look at it from the perspective, this is a little kid just trying to show that he's cool.
Uh huh.
So it's hard for me to discern which one it is because I definitely see both sides here. But the fact that I'm having to even consider that makes it a little bit uncomfortable for me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they did lean a little bit more into the romance here than they should have. Like, if the romance began in episode 2, that's fine. But here, it just felt weird.
Yeah, I could see that a little bit.
And this is nothing against Padme as a character, because I love Padme as a character overall. And I love Natalie Portman a lot. Like, amazing actress, amazing character. It's just some of the writing subtext here we could have done without.
Yeah.
So that's my ding against Padme's character here. And a little bit of a ding to Anakin, but to a lesser degree Anakin.
By the way, the thing I wanted to say real quick is that that scene, believe it or not, the "Are you an angel?" line that people make fun of. Well, other Star Wars material actually makes fun of it. There's in the second Knights of the Old Republic video game, if your character is female, because early on in the game, you're walking around, and you don't have any clothes on, so you're walking around in your underwear. And if your character is female and you encounter this one male companion character, when you walk in, the guy is going to say, his name is Adam, by the way. He says, "Are you an angel?" And then he says, "Oh, no, I'm just kidding. That's the worst pickup line I've ever used. Just hope some poor kid doesn't start using it." That's one of the best jokes I've ever
That's pretty
heard in
awesome.
Star Wars.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, I like Padme here. She's just a total. I mean, she's a badass character here. She actually takes action. She's not like a typical queen who's just content with just staying up in her quarters while everybody suffers. Like, she is a genuinely well-meaning politician who wants to do well. And not only that, but I mean, I like Natalie Portman's performance because even when I was watching this movie when I was 5, I thought Natalie Portman was very pretty and kind of had a crush on her for a little bit growing up. But what kid didn't, you know? Yeah, Natalie Portman is probably like of the 3 Star Wars leading ladies. Like Carrie Fisher, she was very good, very decent looking woman. And as she got older, she aged okay. And Daisy Ridley, as Rey, she's very cute. I think Daisy Ridley is lovely, but Natalie Portman, she is just absolutely stunning. And I'm like, since I grew up with these movies, like she was one of my first crushes. The other one being Cassie from Power Rangers, but that's a different
Of
story.
course.
So, yeah, Cassie, the Pink Turbo Ranger, Pink Space Ranger. Which, by the way, I'm going to use that as just a plug for you guys to go check out our Toku Secrets podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now there's a ton of other different characters in this, but the last main one we can talk about here is, and thankfully we don't have to talk about him in the other movies, Jar Jar Binks.
Okay. I will struggle here a little bit because I want to be nice, but I grew up hating Jar Jar as a character because I didn't like how he talked. I didn't like what he brought to the table as growing up watching this movie. Honestly, I think one of the biggest reasons I hated the prequel trilogies when I was in my in between period is because of Jar Jar's existence and the Gungan existence in general. But if you really think about Jar Jar's character, literally, he walks into the middle of a fight and he meets 2 Jedi Knight and he gets swept off into an adventure he didn't really know he was going to be in. And he ends up being an unintentional like hero of this battle on Naboo. And this kind of brings him into the events of the next 2 movies after. But when you really think about it, Jar Jar is just trying to be an everyday guy. It's just that he's a little bit more annoying than the rest of the cast. And that annoying factor being present in a Star Wars movie amplifies it to the point of, I can't stand him. He's annoying. Get him out of here. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. But Ahmed Best is a great guy. I've never met him, but I have all the love and respect for the guy for what he had to endure for playing Jar Jar and for my part in that Jar Jar hate. Mr. Ahmed Best, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, him and Jake Lloyd had it the worst from this, and I feel bad for both of them. I really do. But no, I mean, Jar Jar wasn't a terrible character when you really look at what he brought to the table in terms of like he was there to help bring Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to the Naboo Palace. He was there to help broker a deal to get the Gungans to help at the end. And he was just kind of a supporting character even during the Tatooine stuff. Like he didn't do a lot, but he was just kind of there to fill space and to be moral support if he was needed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about Jar Jar? Because
I mean, I just think Jar Jar, even when I was a kid, I wasn't really a huge fan of him. He's just not, I mean, he's not funny. He's kind of annoying, but I mean, to the film, to the prequel's credit, they kind of realized that Jar Jar, I think even the films were kind of aware that Jar Jar didn't really work in this movie because he doesn't appear much in the Attack of the Clones, aside from like maybe one or two scenes, and I think he only has like one line and like two scene appearances in Revenge of the Sith. So at least I can give the prequels credit that they, gradually reduced Jar Jar's role in each of the movies.
and I'm kind of glad that they included him in Clone Wars as a character. Like there's a couple episodes where he does get a chance to come out, and I I feel like they kind of redeem him a little bit in those episodes because I did remember, I don't know when this was in the Clone Wars, like what season or anything, but whatever episode it was that they put Mace Windu and Jar Jar Binks together to do something.
Yeah, it was in like season 6.
Yeah, I thought it was a good episode.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are ways to use Jar Jar because, like I said earlier, the only thing I really had against Jar Jar is how he talked. The entire Yusa Misa stuff. I mean, that like grated on my nerves even watching this morning. But honestly, it didn't grate on my nerves as much this morning because I was looking at it from a more open mind thing. Because Nate, when I was watching this movie, I really want to come at this from an open mind, throwing out all my predispositions I've had to the movie over the years, because I really wanted to give this movie a fair chance that I hadn't given it before. And even the Yusa Misa stuff wasn't as annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's difficult to listen to because literally he doesn't say I'm, he also says my instead of I. And grammatically it hurts my head to think about it. But again, there were characters in I think it was Return of the Jedi or maybe Empire Strike Back in the background who talked like that a little bit. Like they said stuff like poodoo, they said stuff like, they had their own weird way of talking and they had their own alien speak. So is it really that much more of a stretch to have this guy?
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
So I mean, I'm trying to get us an open-minded way to look at it because yes, Jar Jar end of the day is kind of annoying, but he had a really good heart. He really tried his best.
Yeah, I think he's overhated as far as annoying comic relief characters go. Like there's probably like 5 characters from different movies that I probably dislike a lot more. Like I dislike like the Leo roommate guy, as well as those 2 twin robots from the second Transformers movie. Those characters are worse than Jar Jar Binks in my opinion. um there's a certain ranger from a Sentai, and I'm not going to mention by name, that I'm pretty sure Riz would agree is a character that's worse than Jar Jar. um
Yes. And when I was making the comment about Jar Jar and the language thing and how he talked, I was actually thinking about the Sentai actor a little bit and his character, and I was wondering, well, am I gonna end up saying the same thing about him in 10 years from now? And I was like, nah, there's
no.
no way. There's no way.
There's a Power Ranger character from a certain season that we constantly bag on, and on the Toko Secrets podcast. a certain Blue Ranger, who I think is worse than Jar Jar. I don't know. I think Jar Jar.
If you can't guess it, his name rhymes with facts.
Yeah.
Because that hate is true facts.
Yeah, so Jar Jar is overhated. I mean, is he a good character? No, absolutely not. But he's also overhated horribly.
Agreed. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Jar Jar. I don't have much else to say about him.
Yeah. We can move on to music now then.
10 out of 10 would do again.
Yeah. Like,
Duel of the Fates is still on my hype list of stuff to listen to, and I need to get hyped up.
yeah, Duel of the Fates is probably my number one Star Wars song ever.
Yeah.
But I also like I really like the song that plays when they're escaping from Naboo on the ship.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene where like they have to fight off the droids in the hangar, then they get on the ship, and then they have to get past the blockade. I love that soundtrack, and they use a piece of that music a little bit later in another just as intense scene in Revenge of the Sith. So I really like that music. My wife is a huge fan of the song that plays when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are fighting the droids on the Trade Federation ship. She likes to call that her little Jedi theme music, which, yeah, I really like that.
I like the song that's playing at the end when the Gungan Big Bad Boss and Padme are having their ceremonial union thing happen.
Yeah, the Naboo celebration, which, fun fact, like people have pointed this out, and this is actually confirmed to be true. The song that plays during that scene, it's apparently the scene. Okay, take the same music that plays in Return of the Jedi when Palpatine has arrived on the Death Star. Basically, Palpatine's first appearance. Ian McDermott's first appearance as Palpatine, actually. And but you speed it up really much, to give the idea, because it's meant to be an illusion. When it's slower and darker, that's because Palpatine is now like fully masked off, just some evil Sith Lord who does evil things. But here, because he's playing the role of like some well-meaning and absolutely amazing politician who just loves people, you have like this fast and like such nice and like energetic type of theme playing. That's just genius from John Williams.
Oh yeah, it is amazing what they do with that. And then I read somewhere, and I didn't really stop to pay attention in this movie when I was rewatching it, but I've read that the Vader theme plays in some form or another at one point in an Anakin scene, but I didn't catch it this time around.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is, but I have to go looking for the article to find it again. I'll try and bring it up in our next Attack of the Clones podcast if I remember.
Yep. But yeah, this is maybe I prefer the Revenge of the Sith soundtrack as a whole, but this one still has some really iconic music.
Yeah.
Do we want to say anything about the special effects?
Yeah, we kind of have to, because special effects here are phenomenal. So lesser known fact about me, I did some video effects project stuff in college, like in a class for animation, and my final project, I decided to do a lightsaber duel. So I got some of my friends to take some bamboo sticks, and I animated the bamboo sticks to be lightsabers by rotoscoping them, which is the original way that you animated lightsabers back in the original trilogy. And having gone through that process of rotoscoping and having the end result, according to my animation professor, not me, my animation professor, he told me, your work on this project could have landed you a job at Lucasfilms because you were right on par with them. That tells me how difficult that was, because that was a really difficult project to have done. Because my clip was only like 30, 40 seconds long, Whereas we have a whole movie here of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, the effects are just visually stunning. I mean, it's great to where, we can finally like show more like I'm really glad that like they took advantage with these computer effects where we can show more like elaborate worlds as opposed to just going to the Tunis. How do you pronounce it again, Riz?
What?
The Tunistrian desert.
Tunisian?
Tunisian desert. You go to the Tunisian desert, and then you just say, okay, there's an entire planet that looks like the Tunisian desert, or going to like,
Yeah.
a forest and saying, okay, this entire planet in indoor looks exactly like this planet with no real like differences. But then we get a world like Naboo where like there's some like, really lush and like fertile forests, but then we get like these beautiful cities elsewhere. Like it's just great that George Lucas takes full advantage with those effects to the point where even people who hated this movie when it came out just said that it was an absolutely like visually stunning masterpiece.
Yeah. No, I mean, this movie is just rife with really good visual effects. One thing I'm going to mention here, which I feel like you're going to have in your later section, Nate, um, when they had Yoda brought back for the movie, Yoda was originally a puppet, and then Yoda was CGI animated in a later release of it. I watched the puppet version of it this morning because I wanted to see how the puppet one was, because I watched the CGI one like 10 years ago or something. And honestly, it was kind of cool seeing them be able to use the puppet stuff for Yoda pretty well, while also seamlessly pulling in CGI stuff in other scenes. So that just kind of spoke to the depth of what they were capable of doing in this movie.
Mm-hmm. But with was there anything else you wanted to say about special effects?
Nope.
Okay, we can move on to some fun facts here. There's not as many fun facts that I could find, other than just some small Easter eggs, which we'll go over. Here's a big one. Sofia Coppola, she's the daughter of the critically acclaimed director Francis Ford Coppola. She had a role, albeit a not very well received role, in the third Godfather movie, and she's also she's a great director. Like she directed Lost in Translation, so that's pretty big. But she appears in a cameo as one of Padme's handmaidens. She took the role as a favor to Lucas, who's a friend of her father's. Um, for reasons that are unknown, Ray Park accidentally kept one of his earrings on while preparing to film scenes and getting into makeup for Darth Maul. And this has actually had a lasting impact on Maul's design because the earring is now seen as part of his design in all subsequent appearances, whether it be comics or the animated series. So that's pretty big. During the scene of Padme mourning the corruption of the Senate, there's some familiar looking ships from other franchises that can be seen in the background, including the Star Trek Enterprise ship and a spinner ship from the Blade Runner movie.
It's all connected.
Yep. uh, During the scene of the battle droid shutting down, the identification number on the droid Jar Jar pushes over is 1138. If you guys have watched the other reviews we've done on the movies, you'll know that this is the movie's obligatory reference to Lucas's THX 1138 film. During the Senate meeting, there is an alien species among the Senate that bears an uncanny resemblance to the iconic E.T. character from Spielberg's beloved film, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which is kind of funny because if you've actually watched the E.T. movie, there's a fair share of Star Wars references in that movie. So here's George Lucas returning the favor.
It's still all connected. Go, go, go.
Yep. Qui-Gon's communicator that he uses to talk with Obi-Wan on Tatooine is actually a repurposed Sensor Excel women's electric razor. That's pretty cool.
Like an Axel razor?
Yeah, an electric razor.
Oh, God.
Yep.
I need to go rewatch that scene now. What?
During Anakin's encounter with Sebulba, when he's attacking Jar Jar, there's a character that bears an uncanny resemblance to Jedi Master Quinlan Voss, who can be seen sitting in the background. We're not sure if this is actually meant to be boss though, so that's still up for debate. And finally, this one last fun fact. During the scene where Anakin is fixing his pod racer for the race, where he's testing, right after the scene where Qui-Gon speaks with Shmi, there's a group of kids that come over to like talk with Anakin. One of those children is played by George Lucas's daughter. The child's name is Amy, and she has one line, quote, "You've been working on that thing for years," unquote. That's George Lucas's daughter. Um, so yeah, those are the fun facts.
What?
And so we want to talk about our favorite scene here, Riz.
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so obviously I love the Darth Maul duel. It's probably one of my favorite lightsabers duels, just with how well, just the fight choreography and just how it's much more intense. Like I always enjoyed watching that scene when I was a kid. But so that would probably be number one. But I also want to give a shout out to the scene in the Senate where you can kind of see, you know, Palpatine like not clearly unless you're part of the audience. I mean, obviously Padme doesn't know, but he's clearly trying to manipulate Padme into trying to question Valorum's power so that he can move himself into the Senate. Like honestly, a
Yeah.
lot of Palpatine scenes while he's Senator Palpatine and like playing Padme like a fiddle is those are some of my favorite scenes too. Still probably prefer the lightsaber duel just because of how intense it is, but
Yeah.
I still love Palpatine scenes.
So those are two of my favorite scenes as well. Um, lightsaber scene, obviously, because really fun fight choreography. But the Palpatine scene kind of leans into something that will become a favorite Force moment as well for me. So I have a strong feeling here that Palpatine was exerting Jedi mind trick type stuff, maybe Sith mind tricks in this case, on Padme to make her do the call for vote or no confidence. And it's a really subtle detail that if you blink, you miss it type of thing.
Yep.
And I thought it was really awesome to see just how far he was willing to go and how blatant he was in the use of his powers to get what he wanted. But nobody even stopped to think what he was doing there, like nobody even noticed it. And that just feeds more into the brilliance of what he's doing. But other than that, my other favorite scene, just Padme and Anakin, um, when they're on the way back to Naboo, and Anakin is just processing everything, and they just have that moment where she gives him a blanket, and I thought that was a really sweet, genuine moment.
Hmm.
So, yeah, those are mine.
Okay, then do we really have to say a favorite Force moment? Like, is there any Force moments here that really stand out?
So the only thing I would really mention here that does stand out is something that I mentioned earlier, and that is uh the first time we ever see a double-sided lightsaber on screen.
Yeah.
Like that's just showing another layer to the force power bucket that we have to work with.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. So movie rankings?
Yep, and then we can close this thing out.
Okay. So the more I look at this movie, now I'm going to start off by saying when I first saw this movie and, in the years that came after, this movie lived very firmly at the D tier rank. The only movie to be worse than it, in my opinion, was Episode 9, which has the F rank as of right now, but that's a spoiler for way later on. Um, but for me, having rewatched the movie, having all the context of Clone Wars, the Obi-Wan TV show, Rebels, and just everything else in the universe that came after, and just me rewatching the movie today with an open mind, I I want to raise the rank from a D, And this morning, I was kind of thinking high C, low B. But then, after really thinking about my Anakin rant that I gave this morning, or today in the podcast, um, I think it's not high C. It'll probably be a low B, meaning I'm probably leaning on this being a B tier. But I'm still kind of flimsy on that for the moment because it's hard to raise something up 2 ranks just like that, in my opinion. And so I'm still mulling it over. So while you give your thoughts, I'm going to give myself a few more minutes to decide C or B here.
Yeah, despite some of the issues that I have with Anakin, I still want to call this a B tier movie. I can understand how some people might be turned off by I know that I've actually did praise the plot, but I can understand that people might find the plot to be a little complicated. But I feel like when you just simply look at this from the perspective of this is just one big elaborate plan that Palpatine had to eventually to as part of a stepping stone to him eventually becoming just emperor for life in the Empire. If you look at it from that perspective, then it's just kind of interesting to watch, just seeing how Palpatine is just pulling everyone's strings as like this big puppet master. So I really think that that's interesting. I really love Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor's performances. I think they both have really great chemistry together as master and apprentice, and I think when they're on screen together, they're both great characters. I think Natalie Portman does a really good job. Jake Lloyd, okay, he's not a great actor, and I kind of wish that maybe they would have casted someone who's a bit more of a proven actor, like maybe Haley Joel Osment. But I don't want to. But at the same time, I don't think that Jake Lloyd deserved all the criticism that he got, and I could tell that he was doing his best. So I I do think that it's overall a movie that has some good that does have a lot of good. It's not a perfect movie though. I kind of wish that maybe maybe there was at least one scene to kind of establish Anakin becoming who he will eventually become. Even though Riz has kind of warmed me up to that idea that maybe it was there, just not fleshed out in the best way it could be. So overall, I do want to say that this is a low, maybe mid B tier movie. It's definitely not the worst Star Wars movie. I don't even think it's the worst of the prequels. Like even when other prequels came out, and people were just ranking the prequels, I don't actually think this is the worst prequel movie. Spoiler alert! I think the next one is the worst of the prequels. But with that said, like it's as someone who and it's easier for me to say that as someone who never actually hated this movie, unlike other people, because I was really too young to have any idea of why people hated this movie. I didn't figure out that people hated this movie until hell, probably around the time that the original 2008 Clone Wars series was premiering on Cartoon Network when I was in 8th grade. So as someone who never hated the movie, except for maybe that one brief period where I just kind of jumped on that bandwagon, even then I was kind of mostly just pretending to hate the movie. I recognize the problems with it as an adult, but I still think that it has a lot of great moments, and that's why it is ultimately a mid B tier movie for me.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep mine at a low B, just because looking ahead to other movies, I know there's going to be one that's going to be a higher B than this one.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that movie when we get there. But definitely, I'm going to keep this at a B tier. And I got to say, Nate, Rizwan from 5 or 6 years ago would be looking at future Rizwan and wanting to hit him over the head with a shovel. But whatever, dude. I said what I said. This is a B tier movie.
Yeah, and I have no problem saying that too.
Yeah.
Do you have any other closing thoughts?
Um, the only closing thoughts I will give here is I'm very excited to see episode 2, especially given what you said about it being the worst of the 3 prequels, because walking into this movie having not seen it for about 10 years, I kind of agree with you that it'll probably be the weakest, but I also want to see if I'll be proven wrong somehow and I'll find something that'll make it worthy of being a good movie. But I don't know. It's something that I'm kind of curious to see how it works out for me. And I'm also looking forward to the fact that once we get through the next movie, you and I are taking a Clone Wars dive.
Yep. I'm looking forward to that, at least.
Yeah, so that's why I called this the Jedi Squadron's prequel era for
Yep.
the year, because that's all we're doing the rest of the year, aside from covering Skeleton Crew, Acolyte, and
Yep.
Andor stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, guys, buckle in, because we're going into the Clone Wars next.
Yep. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that. I'm definitely looking forward to covering Acolyte too, because I recently watched the trailer again because I'm trying to convince my wife to watch it with me, because I have an easier time convincing her to watch Star Wars stuff with me as long as she doesn't have to know anything prior to watching it. And she told me that she would watch the first episode, so hopefully she'll watch the whole thing with me. But even if she doesn't, I'll be able to watch the whole thing. But I do appreciate her at least giving it a chance. But with that said, next time, guys, when we get back on the Jedi Squadron, barring me doing another book review or something crazy happening, our next podcast will be on Attack of the Clones. After which we'll take a look at the Clone Wars. We'll of course be covering Acolyte as it comes out. We're definitely looking forward to the content that we have as we approach the second half of 2024. We'll see you guys next time as we continue the prequel era. But until that time, bye for now. If you enjoy us here on the Jedi Squadron, then please consider checking out our other content, including the Animated Classified podcast and the Toku Secrets podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or on our website, animesecrets.org. And if you have anything that you would like for us to review that hasn't already been covered here on the Squadron, feel free to leave any commentary, whether it be in the YouTube comments down below or by reaching out to us personally on our website. Also, please follow us on our social media pages, Anime Secrets, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with our content as we post it. If you're listening to us on Spotify or iTunes, we thank you so much and ask you to please leave us a rating out of 5 stars. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, like the video, and leave any comments down below that you may give in your commentary or stuff you want us to review, and so on and so forth, and we will give your commentary a shout out on the Squadron, as we absolutely love to give our fans the shout outs that they deserve. With all that said, we thank you so much for listening to us here on the Jedi Squadron podcast, and we will see you next time for our next adventure through the amazing world of Star Wars. But until that time, the Squadron is preparing to enter hyperspace once again, so you all stay safe, we love you, and may the Force be with you.